But suppose you had Ernie the earthworm, so you had this little, you tell it, Ernie, roll over and play dead. You don't even know if it did. It just lays there. So, you can't really have much of a relationship with these things. When I was a kid, I wondered, why do they sell fleas in these flea markets? I couldn't figure out what, or a flea circus, But at any rate, we choose certain creatures because they can relate to us. But let's clearly understand, there are some things we can do they don't have a category for. Give me an example of something for which they have no category. A dog.
A pet rock.
A pet rock. That's the nuttiest thing that I think has come about. I don't know how long the phase lasted, but somebody made wealth. It reminded me of the statement by H.L. Mencken, nobody ever went broke, underestimating the taste of the American people. That was a perfect stupidity, a sucker born every minute and so forth. But how about, for example, go back...
You're talking about pets not having concepts
of certain concepts.
Murder.
Murder? Yeah, it can't grasp that. It has no category. You can teach the dog to fetch your newspaper, but you cannot teach him to read your newspaper. So the dog has no category when it comes to reading a newspaper. Would you agree? What would you suppose a dog is thinking when the master is reading a newspaper? Probably something along these lines. Why isn't he chewing it? Or at least he can be playing with it. Why does he stare at it? You see? You see the concept? He's just staring at the thing. So try to put yourself in the dog's mind. It has no category. And if you tried to explain the alphabet and grammar and syntax and intention, there's no category. Just stare at you. Like a deer in the headlights. It would have no category for you. And that's important for us to see because there's an analogy here. And again, I think that good theology is done by analogy. That we take truths and we see that all truths seem to have analogous dimensions to them. Nature itself points beyond itself to spiritual truth for those people who have the eyes to see. And in the analogy here, just as we have pets that can relate to us and identify with us, and we can have a relationship with us, with an animal like that. It's very painful to lose a household pet you've had for 10, 15 years. There is actually a grief and a loss in that kind of. But we also understand that there's boundaries to that relationships, and there's going to be a lot of areas of our capacity that will not overlap, that'll go on one side or the other. They're bounded here, but we might do something over here or something over there, and they cannot grasp it. Now,
what about anger? I got an email yesterday, and it said, put your dog and your wife in your trunk for an hour and see which one's happy to see you.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't even go there.
This goes on the air, remember?
This goes on the air, yes. See, I didn't tell that. But you can see where I'm going. Who loves you the most? That's it's not about anger, it's about who loves you the most. Yeah, that's the deal. Yeah. There's something wrong with that actually, but nevertheless, the analogy is obvious. We have overlap. There are areas where we can grasp things that God reveals. He can communicate himself very clearly to us through the Scriptures. He's revealed himself most decisively in the person and work of his Son. Nevertheless, there are going to be all kinds of things that God will comprehend that we could never begin to grasp. And that's important for us to recognize. Have a bit of humility to recognize we're not going to know all things. I don't think you'll ever know all things forever. I think there'll constantly be surprises because our minds are bounded. They're finite. So God will never be boring to you, I promise you that. There'll always be new surprises and new things and new dimensions. Well, by analogy, then, you can see that it would be expected that one of the marks of revelation is that it would actually go beyond the ceiling of your own comprehension. That there would be elements in Scripture that we would expect, if it's a word from God, should transcend our own grasp and our own comprehension. That's why I don't believe that you can reduce theology to logic. Theology cannot be reduced merely to human logic, though people desperately try to do so and fall in love with theological models. The danger is that they're falling in love with an idol. It's not the real thing. That God will always transcend that. And that we have to recognize that there's deep and profound mystery, not only in this world, but also in the one who made the world. And so we grasp that, and we expect that that would be a characteristic of Revelation. It would be full. There would be elements that it would contain, and that's precisely what we find in Scripture. That you don't find that really in other Scriptures. You don't find that true sense of mystery. Oh, you have paradoxes or koans and so forth like that, but it's not at all the same kind of a thing. What is the sound of one hand clapping is not really what we're talking about here. Besides which, that's. See, I can actually make that sound, so I've attained enlightenment already. You can see that. But the point is that this is not just a paradox, it's a mystery. It transcends the ceiling of our comprehension. Now, the Trinity is such a mystery, is it not? God being consisting of three co-eternal persons who are co-equal and co-eternal, but not each other, yet fully God, is a deep mystery. The fact that Jesus was fully God and fully man is a mystery. The fact that he's immanent but transcendent, omnipresent but localized, and so forth, are all mysteries. We don't struggle, I think, as much with the mystery of the Trinity or the God-man as we do with this particular one, divine sovereignty and human responsibility, because this one affects us more deeply and intimately. But my point is to say that this is no more mysterious than things along those other lines. Where I'm going here is the realization that there are going to be tensions that we need to embrace in our vision of the living God. When I was with you last time, I said that God's omnipotence and His mercy, His judgment and His grace, His transcendence and His immanence, His wrath and His love are all equally ultimate. And what we want to do is we want to plump for a God of mercy, grace, immanence, and love, rather than omnipotence, judgment, transcendence, and wrath. You see how that works? It's our own disposition to want to select the attributes of God, and that is why it's become increasingly popular for people to distort the vision of God and to select those attributes. The point is, though, that it's not the God we want, but the God who is. And the God we want is generally not the God who is. But the God we want in our heart of hearts is. That's an interesting tension there. The ones we fabricate in our minds, the one we think we want, is not the real one. But I promise you this, when you see the real God, the real Lord, when you see Jesus face to face, then you will realize that's the one you always truly wanted in your deepest soul, in your deepest self, in your deepest heart. That is the wellspring of all desire. So having embraced the tension, and it's not a balance, it's a tension. To embrace and hold on to that tension is critical. I'm right now looking at the divine sovereignty side of that tension, but we could just as well affirm the human responsibility side as well. That the fact that God rules all things does not diminish the fact that we are moral agents who actually can choose things that will really shape our eternal destiny. That the Scriptures are clear on both sides. So rather than trying to resolve the problem, I embrace that problem. But if we tease out the implications of God's sovereignty, that has profound implications for a grasp of the problem of evil. And we recognize that God does all things well. He has a purpose. And as I go back to the loss of Job's 10 children in Job 1:19, we go back to that just for a moment. And by the way, as we're turning to that, I would also say that there's kind of a perspective. We looking up we see the bottom half of a coin. God sees this upper half. He sees this so that our responsibility is in a context of the overall sovereignty of God, but one does not eliminate the other. We're seeing primarily from this side. In Job 1:19, when it says, "Behold, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they died, and I alone have escaped to tell you," when it describes what we would call a natural disaster, it's very interesting that the text goes on to say, Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground, and worshipped. He said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Through all this he did not sin, nor did he blame God.